tackling tough topics to help you think reasonably about life's most important issues. This is Thinker Sensitive.
You're listening to Thinker Sensitive Podcast. This is Chad Graham, and today we're talking about pastoral apologetics, moving from dorks to disciple makers. I'm here with Elder Chris Egner. He's an elder here at University Assembly. Chris, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Chad, and thank you for the title.
Yes. Chris and I are always joking about how apologetics nerds are so dorky, and we're in that group. So Chris doesn't think he's in that group, but he is in that group.
I am. So reluctantly.
Actually, that's why we're here today. And so Chris and I have been talking over the last few weeks about a problem that we're seeing in the apologetics community where Chris and I tend to be a part of these online forums where apologetics discussions, philosophical discussions are taking place. And we don't see a lot of apologists moving from those online forums or to those cliquish, apologetics groups into the life of the church. They're not migrating their knowledge and their talents for discussing very important things, the things of God, into the life of the church and using those gifts to make disciples. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about the problem and what we think are some ways to help apologists move their talents to South Beach, if you will. I'm a LeBron fan. If they'll move their talents into the church for the life of the church. So Chris, let's talk a little bit about the problem and what do you see happening?
I think you described it perfectly in that. And it's very personal to me as well because I spent years and years and years and years more on the dorky side. Mm-hmm. And I saw the real problem of always having a large group of non-Christian friends and me wanting to get that knowledge across to them, but doing it in a way that they wanted to listen. Yeah. They were respectful and they would listen to me, but it didn't seem to be having the impact that I wished. They, none of them are philosophy majors. None of them are scientists. None of them are. So that's why I think the title "Dorks to Disciple Makers." It was a big challenge to me. How do I make that transition? How do I, talk about this in a way that they see the need for Christ? Yeah. They recognize their brokenness in front of Christ and then His healing.
Yeah. And so what are some ways that you've worked on this? How have you taken these philosophical arguments that you've spent years studying, these apologetic arguments that you've spent years studying, how have you moved that from the classroom, from the online forum, into relevant disciple making in the church?
I think I hear this all the time. Number one, failing.
Yeah.
Definitely getting out there and, first of all, having the non-Christian friends.
Yes. Step one.
Yes. Get the right audience. And if you don't have that, then you have to be intentional about it. And whether maybe there's people at work or a neighbor. So I think step one is getting uncomfortable. But the big switch for me was taking what I'd say is more of a pastoral approach to it. I got all the knowledge. Now I have to think more like a pastor.
Yeah.
The one book that helped me greatly was Timothy Keller's Preaching.
I love that book.
Yeah, as a pastor, you should.
Yes. Yeah.
And not a book that I would normally, not being a pastor, would normally pick up and read. Yeah. But just being a fan of Timothy Keller, who I think he does a good job of modeling this whole approach.
He does.
And I know Timothy Keller is well known in apologetic circles, but he's usually not at the top of the list. He's not attending the big apologetic conferences or anything like that. But he's got a lot to say about this, and his book Preaching does a good job of understanding that your non-Christian friends you're around, they have real needs, and Christianity speaks to their needs better than any worldview can, obviously, because it's true.
Yeah. And so what are some ways that you've done this with people in your life? Give us some practical examples of how you've done this.
I think the most, I have a bunch, but the first one that stands out to me is we were fostering a teen this past year. We had her in our house for about a year. Mm-hmm. We were working towards an adoption. It didn't work out that way. But she came to us, obviously very broken, and what she called herself an atheist. Now, as much as a 13-year-old can call themselves an atheist. She called herself an atheist. And the first month we had her, it was extremely difficult because she was very disrespectful towards our faith. And, I'd be reading, I remember I was reading reading one of Timothy Keller's books, and it was on the ottoman, and she picked it up, looked at it, read the back cover, threw it down and said, "This is stupid. Why would anybody believe this? If we're listening to Christian music," so just a very angry, so that, my first, as like an apologist, my first response is, well, do you not know how credible this is? Do you not know the reliability of the New Testament? Do you not know, all these philosophical, let me, tell you about them. But we didn't. We listened to her and understood more of her backstory, her pain. And then it kind of culminated. One day we were in the garage, and she was riding her bike. I was working out. She came in, and we started talking about books a little bit. And she kind of blew up then and just went off about God and suffering. Like, if God does exist, I don't want him because of what he's done to me in my past. Yeah. He can't be. And more so, she's like, I don't think he can be true. It's not possible because of all the suffering that I have gone through as a child. And that really, that'll settle you down for a second from all, so then the pastoral switch goes on, and more listening to her, but then also asking her some questions, just more general, just about God. Like, what does she think? I had just gotten done reading a great book on evil and suffering by Clay Jones. Why Does God Allow Evil and Suffering? Phenomenal book. None of it applied at the moment. Yeah. And it just, I think, just a quick side note, I think a lot of that stuff does apply in the sense that it makes you more confident. Yeah. Because my mind's not racing for answers. I'm resting in the knowledge and the truth of Christ and how to deal with evil and suffering. In my mind, I've got it. Yeah. So you don't go into panic mode when these situations come up, which is important. Right. So you can be more calm and ask questions and listen.
Think about the human connection.
Exactly. Yeah. And just really think about what she's been through. Yeah. So of course it makes perfect sense. Her reasoning about God. I mean, you can't blame her for that. Yeah. So, but then just really get right to the heart, cut through all that, and just simply talk about Jesus. And I asked her, I'm like, well, do you know what Jesus went through exactly? And she's like, well, I know he died. Yeah. And I'm like, well, let's unpack that a little bit more, and just talked about his suffering and his pain. And then shared my testimony, and which was filled with some pain and childhood and suffering, not equal to hers, but to a point where I'm like, I can understand. And she just came up crying, just gave me a big hug, and then rode away on her bike. Yeah. And I was like, wow.
You guys didn't write it out in a syllogism and
we did
whiteboarding solutions?
No, there was no whiteboards involved. There was no deep philosophy or logic involved. But I don't want to discredit that because it helped me be more confident in that pastoral approach. It's not an either or; it's a both and.
That's right.
And long story short, she a couple months later, she actually came to Christ. And it was amazing, and it was powerful, and it was moving. And the other thing that we learned through that, too, after that time is just, I don't know what to call it, maybe besides apologetics through prayer. How often do we think about praying with our unbelieving friends or neighbors, coworkers? If we're talking about something like, hey, do you mind maybe just for a minute? Do you mind if I pray? And we started doing that with her. And, we would pray with her all the time. And in that prayer, it was kind of, I don't want to call it apologetics prayer, but there was points that I was trying.
That would be too dorky.
That would be way too dorky. But I don't. I've never read about that or had anyone suggest that to me. We just thought, just based off that conversation and her brokenness, what are verses we can pray over with her that just shows that God cares about the brokenness. Mm-hmm. And then we did get dorky later. After she was saved, and we go on, we got Cold Case Christianity for Kids, and we started going through reliability of the New Testament and this and that. But I think that had the reverse of that. I don't think would have had the impact. Yeah. But before connecting with her on the suffering, and then showing her how Christ speaks to that suffering, whether she believes it's true or not, doesn't matter.
That's the pastoral approach,
right? And then bringing in that apologetics, where she let her connect those dots.
Yeah. So what about, do you have any examples where, it's not someone who's in your constant care, someone who you can disciple at every turn and they're witnessing your character? Do you have any examples of people that you've met either through church or through workplace or anything like that?
Yeah. again, several. I think one of my friends, he had gone through a painful divorce, and it was compounded by several things at the time as well. And he it was a weird, we weren't friends. So this is kind of the exact, that's why I'm thinking about this. It's pretty much on the exact opposite. It's someone who I knew through just a circle of friends. Yeah. But someone I'd never spent, my wife and I never spent one-on-one time with him, nothing. And then he actually reached out, going through all this, and knew that we're in the church. And Christians, and I guess it was just at that point in his life where they have that existential crisis of, who am I? Is there a God? What does this all mean? Kind of that big picture thing amongst that suffering. And we said, hey, we'd love to talk with you. Just come on over for dinner. Yeah. And it just started like that. Just come on over and sit down. And, his first question is, is God real? Who is he? Yeah. And again, understanding his background and where he's coming from, we didn't jump right into, well, this is who he is. This is, in fact, didn't even answer it. They just said, just tell us what happened. Yeah. Have a meal, and we just continued that way in a lot of it. And that, again, that pastoral, but it was not void of apologetics. Right. It was just kind of discerning the right timing for it. Yeah. And knowing that they first have to see that need, feel that need for something more. That, okay, life has not worked out this way. Yeah. And I am broke. I am pain. Maybe it's my fault, maybe it's not, but there's a brokenness that has just impacted my life greatly. And yes, you look at him, and you're like, oh my gosh, you need Jesus. Yeah. And here,
part of the apologetic process is learning to attend to the whole person.
Correct.
And so if a person is broken and they're searching for meaning, and they're searching for, anything, a tree limb as they're falling down, you have to help them feel secure before you just, go in there and take advantage of the situation.
Right. So, yeah, exactly.
Minister to them.
Yes, and just love on them, and just be their friend. And we now grew a very close friendship out of that. I'm proud to call him a brother, and now call him a brother in Christ. Yeah. That's been the most amazing thing. And now I'm actually trying to get him into apologetics. Yeah. Because I can see that kind of desire in him, which is great. But it didn't start there.
So we've talked a lot about the pastoral approach. Mm-hmm. Unpack this a little bit. What does it mean to be pastoral in your apologetics?
I think for me, it's been a recognition of where these people, where people that you're encountering are, and in understanding C.S. Lewis is so big on talking about longings, right? If you realize C.S. Lewis, and trying to identify that in people. What are they longing? What has deeply affected them the most in life, good and bad? So it's not all just about, these horribly people in great suffering. Yeah. I've got non-Christian friends who they'd say, no, I haven't suffered at all in life. Yeah. But they still have longings. They still have needs. They still have things that if Christianity is true, this world will not meet. Yeah. It will not satisfy them. And they're constantly chasing whatever. So I think taking a step back and recognizing those, and then thinking of the gospel and seeing how does Christ speak into this, and then starting from there, mm-hmm. and then laying down that groundwork with them and having those conversations. And that's usually what's happened is these kind of more general, deeper longing needs, and just sharing experiences, because you always find something in common, mm-hmm. something to share. I have very, very liberal friends that are kind of on the opposite political spectrum as me. But I can connect with them on this longing for justice, for care for the poor and needy, and okay, let's connect there. Let's start there. Yeah. And then then you build that safe relationship where, they have a lot of people have been hurt by people in the church. They don't think Christians are safe people to have these conversations with. Yeah. So the more you can nurture that environment with them and connect with them on that level, then you start bringing in. Then the apologetics for me, it's just kind of come naturally. Yeah. I had a friend one time ask me about aliens. Yeah. So we're having all these other deep talks or whatever. Then he asks about aliens. He's like, hey, in a Christian worldview, this is how he asked it. In a Christian worldview, can aliens exist? Yeah. I've never had anyone ask me that before. I've thought about it. I've read some stuff about it. So I was like, great. But then that led this whole apologetics talk about, creation and origin of life, and which was great, and we really enjoyed it.
And if you present yourself as an open person, an approachable person, because everybody's got these questions. Somebody asked me the other day, is the Noah story, is the ark story real? Did that really happen? And it took a while to build that trust for that person to come ask me that, because it's not an everyday conversation topic.
Right.
But it was a real genuine question that they had, and they wanted to talk to me about it. And so one of the things I like to do in trying to help my friends move from the dork circle to the disciple maker circle and occupy both spaces is to build a good anthropology, to have a good theological perspective on, what is it that God has done in this design, in this creation for humanity? What are we created to long for? What are we created to do? What are the effects of the fall on humanity and society? Building these kind of telos, these directional ideas into our approach, so that way, again, we're approaching the whole person. We're not looking merely at the intellectual rigor of philosophical arguments and apologetic formulations. We're looking at the whole person and what are we built to long for? What are these affections of the heart that God desires? And how can we build arguments, or how can we reason with people toward those ends?
And recognizing that each person is different in that.
That's right.
And they have those different needs and longings. Yeah, there's some general ones that we all have.
Yeah.
And we all have them, but I guess some people emphasize others and recognizing that. And then, so I agree with kind of taking that pastoral thing to me, kind of taking the big picture, right, of people, and create. And most people like pastors.
Yeah,
I don't
know if that's true, but we'll see. I'll have to think about that.
Most people, I've been fortunate to be in churches and around churches where the pastors have been very good people.
Yeah.
And even when non-believers come and our non-believing friends are around the church and they meet the pastors, they're like, I really like that person.
Yeah.
So it gets me thinking too, what is it about that?
Yeah.
Why do my friends like Chad,
the
pastor? Why other people? Why and understanding that, getting to know them, and seeing that their approach, because they're very personal people usually, and sometimes, especially me being a dorky apologist, I'm not always that way. So the pastoral thing has greatly changed just my personality in that regard, which I think opens up a few doors as well.
Well, I just want to close with a word of encouragement to the apologists who are listening to the episode. Chris and I love apologetics. We love the online forums and the debate and exercising the life of the mind. This is meant to be an encouragement. You have something to offer the church. The church needs you. And if you're at a church right now that doesn't have a vibrant apologetics ministry that you can dive into, start one. Talk to your pastor, pray about it, come up with a game plan of how you can start exercising your gifts for the glory of God in the life of the church. And don't just throw it on your pastor and say, hey, I want to start an apologetics ministry, start it for me and I'll do it. No, come with a game plan. Really think about this. If you really feel called, if you're always on the online forums, if you're always reading apologetics books, that there might be a real calling there that you need to step into. And don't shirk the responsibility and give it to others. Take that on yourself and wade into the waters of the life of the church and share those gifts with others. Chris, thanks for being on the episode today.
Thank you.
Be sure to check out our other episodes on, we just dropped a season on the issue of socialism. Check those out at thinkersensitive.com. Thanks for listening today.
For more Thinker Sensitive content, visit thinkersensitive.com.